Hello everyone, we're back with another round of tearjerker crime drama TV series recaps. Today I'll be delving into one of the most heart-wrenching Netflix series, When They See Us, which brings to light the harrowing true story of the Central Park Five. Five young boys wrongfully convicted of a brutal crime they didn't commit. This powerful series from 2019 takes us through their unimaginable ordeal and enduring resilience. But before we dive into the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a fantastic day. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. The tale unfolds on the cheerful evening of April 19, 1989 in New York City, USA. Antron McCrae shares a meal with his father, Bobby McCrae. Meanwhile, 14-year-old Kevin Richardson walks homeward alongside his sister, Angie Richardson, recounting his day at school. Corey Wise enjoys quality time with his girlfriend, and Raymond Santana hangs out with his friends. Suddenly, a nearby group of kids dashes towards Central Park. It's a common pastime for the neighborhood youth to venture into Central Park at night for some mischief, which they referred to as doing wilding. Along the way, some kids invite Yusuf Salam and Corey Wise to join them. Despite being on a date with his girlfriend, Corey departs, promising to return in 5 minutes. Little do they know, those 5 minutes will morph into a decade-long ordeal, as we'll uncover later in the narrative. The once cheerful evening has transformed into the somber night of April 19, 1989. All the local children gather in Central Park, engaging in playful taunting of cyclists and leisurely strolling through the park like typical mischievous boys of their age. However, their innocent amusement takes a dark turn when they catch the distant wail of approaching police sirens. Panic sets in as they try to flee. While some succeed in escaping, others are apprehended by law enforcement. Raymond finds himself among those captured by the police, while Kevin, too, is caught and subjected to a violent assault, leaving him with facial injuries. It is now revealed that a sexual assault has occurred in the park. A young 28-year-old female jogger, Trisha Mealy, is found seriously injured and bleeding. Police investigator Linda Fairstein arrives at the scene to collect evidence. She suspects the black kids to be responsible for the incident and directs the police to capture all the suspects. The following day, Kevin's and Raymond's parents rush to the police station, desperately pleading with the authorities that their sons are innocent and incapable of committing such a heinous act. However, their pleas fall on deaf ears as the police remain unmoved by their appeals. The focus shifts to Antron's home, where police forcefully enter and commence their investigation. Antron is taken into custody for further questioning. Meanwhile, another police investigator, Nancy Ryan, attempts to reassure Linda, stating that the suspects they apprehended are just young boys and couldn't possibly be involved in such a serious crime. However, Linda remains adamant and expresses racially charged beliefs, insinuating that only individuals of African descent could be implicated in such offenses. In the subsequent scene, police officers encounter Corey and Yusuf on the streets and begin their investigation. While Corey's name isn't on their list of suspects, they opt to pursue further inquiries into Yusuf's involvement. Despite not being directly implicated, Corey, being Yusuf's friend, willingly chooses to accompany him, offering moral support during the interrogation. At the police station, detectives begin the intense interrogation of Kevin, Antron, Yusuf, and Raymond, bombarding them with disturbing questions. The children are overwhelmed and confused by the harsh treatment from the detectives, but they all steadfastly refuse to confess to the crime. Their parents are deeply troubled by the interrogation process. The detectives then request to speak privately with Antron's father, Bobby McCrae. Offering him a deal, the detective suggests that if Antron confesses to the crime, he can be released home easily. Bobby, feeling the pressure, attempts to persuade Antron to admit to the crime, but Antron adamantly refuses. In a moment of frustration and desperation, Bobby erupts in anger, throwing a chair and shouting at Antron, insisting that they must obey the police because they are black and have no rights, or else they won't be set free. Reluctantly, Antron agrees under his father's pressure. Kevin and Raymond, overwhelmed by fear and naivety, succumb to the pressure and accept the proposal, admitting to the crime on camera. Unaware of the potential consequences, they are driven by the desire to escape the interrogation as quickly as possible. During Kevin's confession, his sister Angie breaks down in tears, questioning how he could lie to himself and confess to such a terrible falsehood. Despite her pleas, Kevin tearfully insists that he just wants to put an end to the ordeal and return home. Meanwhile, Yusuf's mother, Sharon Salam, hurries to the police station with bail money. She confronts the authorities, warning them that she will report their unjust interrogation tactics to the New York Times if they don't stop the false interrogation of her son without proper legal representation or a valid warrant. She successfully retrieves Yusef from the station and takes him home, while Corey remains at the police station, anxiously awaiting the conclusion of Yusef's interrogation. Linda proceeds to meet with counselor Elizabeth Lederer, detailing the case to her. However, Elizabeth expresses skepticism about Linda's conclusions, suggesting that the children may be innocent and implying that Linda's actions are influenced by racial bias. Despite Elizabeth's doubts, Linda remains steadfast in her suspicions, insisting that she will ensure the children face punishment for the crime. As Corey's mother, Dolores Wise, grows increasingly worried about her son's whereabouts, she rushes to the police station in search of Corey. Despite her efforts, she's unable to locate him. Surrounded by news reporters eager for information, Dolores maintains her son's innocence, asserting that he has no involvement in the case and has been unlawfully detained. Meanwhile, inside the police station, Corey is subjected to physical assault by the detectives, and threatened with severe consequences if he doesn't admit to the crime. Faced with coercion and the promise of safety if he confesses, Corey reluctantly agrees and gives a false confession in front of the camera and counselor Elizabeth. The false promises made by the police quickly unravel as all the children find themselves imprisoned in a room, grappling with confusion over why they are being targeted, and what motives could lie behind the police's actions. In the following scene, the 5 boys are seen being arrested and escorted toward the police van, surrounded by a frenzy of media coverage broadcasting the events live. 6 months have passed since the incident, and all the boys, except Yusef, remain in police custody. Their trial is about to commence. Yusef, accompanied by his mother Sharon, and their lawyer Robert Burns, heads to the courthouse. As they arrive, the media bombards them with intrusive questions, and one white reporter even shouts that the boys deserve the death penalty. This enrages Sharon, who angrily confronts the reporter. Meanwhile, a young Donald Trump appears on television, giving an interview in which he claims that black people are crossing boundaries in the country and need to be stopped. His inflammatory remarks further aggravate the already tense situation. Antron arrives with his lawyer, Mickey Joseph. Both Antron and Yusef's families, along with their lawyers, gather at a house to discuss their strategy. The lawyers point out that the police lack physical evidence linking the boys to the crime, giving them confidence that they can win the case. However, the police employ a divide-and-conquer strategy to drive a wedge between the families. This tactic proves effective, as the families struggle to maintain unity. The division arises because Yusef didn't confess to the crime on camera, thanks to his mother's timely intervention, while Antron did confess. This disparity creates tension and distrust, leading both families to decide to pursue their cases separately with different lawyers. Bobby becomes deeply disturbed, blaming himself for Antron's predicament. He regrets forcing Antron to confess, believing that the situation might have been better otherwise. Antron's mother is also angry with Bobby for his actions, leading to their separation. During the judicial hearing, a large crowd gathers outside the court, expressing support for the boys and proclaiming their innocence. They assert that the boys are being targeted solely because of racism. As the hearing begins, all the boys arrive with their lawyers and parents. The defense lawyers present a strong case, countering the allegations made by the police attorney, Elizabeth Lederer. Lederer highlights the videotaped confessions as evidence of the boys' guilt. In response, the defense lawyers argue that the boys were coerced into making false confessions under duress, insisting that these statements have no basis in truth. After the hearing, Elizabeth meets with Officer Linda, expressing concern that the police lack solid evidence against the boys, and cannot solely rely on the videotaped confessions. In response, Linda reveals her strategy to collect DNA samples from the boys' homes and plant them at the crime scene, even if she can find just one hair cell. Elizabeth warns Linda that such actions would be illegal, but Linda, driven by her radical beliefs, ignores her, and proceeds with her plan. The next day, the victim, Tricia Maley, arrives at the courtroom to give her testimony. She appears frail and struggles to walk, evoking sympathy from the courtroom audience. Elizabeth questions Tricia about her memories of the night of April 19, 1989. Tricia responds that she doesn't remember the incident itself but recalls the events earlier that day. She mentions returning home from work at 5 p.m. and preparing to go jogging. Elizabeth then shows Tricia her blood-soaked shirt and asks if she remembers it. Tricia becomes emotional, recognizing it as the shirt she wore that day. Elizabeth then presents her shoes, which Tricia also remembers. When asked about her injuries, Tricia explains that she has nerve damage in her spine, which impairs her ability to walk properly or climb stairs. She also shares that she has lost her sense of smell and suffers from constant psychological trauma. The courtroom falls silent, everyone struck by the extent of her suffering. After the hearing, Antron meets his father, Bobby, and asks why he hasn't been coming home. Bobby, hiding his feelings of guilt, claims he has business matters to attend to, and cannot come home for a few days. In truth, Bobby feels responsible for Antron's ordeal. As he bids Antron goodbye in the taxi, he hands him some money, leaving Antron deeply upset by their strained relationship and his father's apparent absence. The next day, the detectives who coerced the boys into confessing are summoned to record their testimonies. The officers falsely claim that the boys confessed willingly and were not forced. The boys' lawyers counter this by presenting evidence from the same videos, highlighting that the boys repeatedly stated their innocence, which the detectives conveniently ignored. The hearing is then dismissed. Antron and Raymond, feeling hopeful, converse with each other, expressing optimism that their diligent lawyers might win the case. In the following hearing, a medical doctor is called to testify. He reveals that DNA evidence has been found at the crime scene, shocking the entire court. Antron's lawyer asks the doctor if any of the DNA matches the boys. The doctor responds that none of the DNA matches the boys' profiles. This revelation elates the boys' families and the entire courtroom, as it strongly supports their innocence. The next day, it is time for Antron's father, Bobby, to testify. Antron, still upset with his father, refuses to accompany him. Bobby takes the stand and emotionally confesses that he was the one who forced Antron to admit to the crime on camera. He explains that the detectives had offered him a deal, promising that Antron would be released immediately if he confessed. Realizing the gravity of his mistake, Bobby apologizes sincerely. Antron's mother, moved by his testimony, breaks down in tears. The court then proceeds to display the videotaped confessions of the boys on a TV. The footage is harrowing and deeply distressing for the families, who watch helplessly as their children, under duress, confess to a crime they did not commit. The parents, saddened and disturbed by the ordeal, are left feeling powerless to protect their sons. Now it's Corey Wise's turn. His videotaped confession is shown in court, and he is questioned about why he committed the crime. Corey explains that he was completely manipulated by the police. He wasn't even initially a suspect but was lured to the station where he was harassed and coerced into confessing as his only means to end the torture. Despite his explanation, the jury remains unsympathetic. Corey is then forced to read the documents he signed to confess to the crime. He states that he cannot read because he never attended school, but the jury insists, causing Corey to break down and cry in court. All the lawyers work tirelessly to defend the boys, and the trial drags on for 6 long months. The day of judgment finally arrives. The judge, notorious for his bias towards the government, announces that the boys are guilty of rape and attempted murder. The courtroom reacts with anger and disappointment upon hearing the verdict. The parents of the boys, overcome with emotion and helplessness, break down in tears. Corey, being over 16, receives the longest sentence, while the rest of the boys are sentenced to a decade in prison for a crime they did not commit. The families and supporters are left devastated, grappling with the profound injustice that has befallen their children. Several days pass, and the boys find themselves in prison. Raymond speaks to his father over the telephone, updating him on the situation. Raymond's father inquires about life in jail, and if Raymond has been eating properly. Raymond responds that it's tough living there. At the end of each week, families are permitted to visit the prisoners. Raymond's and Antron's parents come to meet their sons. Antron shares with his mother that he's been plagued by nightmares and is experiencing a lot of pain. He questions why the state seems to be against black people and what wrong they've done to deserve such hatred. Antron's mother responds with wisdom, advising him not to internalize the hate directed towards them and to always love himself. She acknowledges the world's injustices but encourages him to maintain hope and patience, believing that God will eventually help them escape their suffering. More than a decade has passed, and Antron is finally released from prison, now a young man. He reunites with his mother, and together they return home. As Antron steps into the house he left behind so many years ago, he is overcome with emotion. Inside, Antron finds his father, Bobby, lying in bed in ailing condition. Bobby sits up to greet his son, but Antron, consumed with resentment, does not return the greeting and storms away in anger. Later, Antron questions his mother about why she allowed Bobby back into their lives after he left them. His mother explains that she felt compassion for Bobby. Despite the chaos he caused, she believes in giving second chances and reconciling broken relationships. Antron, still harboring deep-seated resentment towards his father, angrily refuses to discuss Bobby further, blaming him for the decade of suffering he endured in prison. Raymond, finally free after a decade in prison, joyfully takes in his newfound freedom and the sights of his surroundings. Everything feels different to him, as he spent his entire childhood behind bars. Eager to embrace his newfound liberty, Raymond decides to indulge in a simple pleasure. He buys a video game and heads home to reunite with his father. As Raymond returns home, the townspeople are surprised by his arrival. He warmly reconnects with his father, emotionally embracing him. His father, in return, kisses him and welcomes him inside. However, Raymond's joy is dampened when he meets his stepmother, Elena, who does not greet him kindly, possibly viewing him as a rapist. Eager to retreat to the comfort of his room and play his new video game, Raymond is shocked to find that his room has been changed. His father explains that Elena rearranged it for her baby, leaving Raymond feeling upset and displaced. Despite this, Raymond finds solace in the childhood memories still present on his door, offering a bittersweet reminder of his past. The scene shifts, and we see Antron still harboring anger towards Bobby. Bobby enters Antron's room with food, attempting to mend their relationship, but Antron remains silent. Bobby quietly leaves the tray of food and exits the room, his remorse evident. It's clear that Bobby is ashamed of his past actions and wants to apologize. But Antron is not yet ready to forgive. In another scene, we witness a flashback of Yusef in jail. His mother visits him regularly, checking on his well-being and offering emotional support. Yusef expresses the difficulties he faces, but his mother advises him to have faith in God and remain patient. Now a decade later, Yusef has been released and is having a welcome party at home. However, despite his newfound freedom, he appears visibly saddened and depressed. In the flashback scene featuring Kevin in jail, we witness his family's unwavering support during their weekly visits. One day, Kevin's sister Angie shares a personal story with him about a guy she met at work who showed interest in her. She recounts how he consistently visited her and eventually proposed to her, but she turned him down. Kevin is taken aback by this revelation and questions why she rejected the proposal. Angie's response is heartfelt and deeply resonates with Kevin. She explains that she couldn't find happiness with someone else while her younger brother was suffering in jail. Kevin is overcome with emotion, feeling both touched and burdened by his sister's sacrifice. Kevin reassures Angie that she doesn't need to feel guilty or depressed because of him, but Angie and their mother express that they all share in the pain and struggles together. They emphasize that Kevin's imprisonment affects them all, and they embrace each other tightly, finding solace and strength in their familial bond. More than a decade has passed, and Kevin is finally a free man, returning home with Angie by his side. During their journey, Kevin expresses a desire to revisit Central Park, wanting to reminisce about the past. Angie is speechless upon hearing this, sensing that Kevin may be grappling with post-traumatic stress disorder. She recognizes that Kevin, like the other boys, has endured immense trauma and struggles to adjust to life outside of prison, where they lost their precious childhood for a crime they didn't commit. Meanwhile, Raymond is facing challenges in finding employment. Despite his efforts to apply for various jobs across New York, he is repeatedly rejected due to his criminal record of sexual assault. Raymond becomes increasingly frustrated and depressed by the constant rejection. He then throws his dress tie in despair. Raymond returns home feeling depressed, and his anguish is exacerbated by Elena's hurtful taunts, labeling him as useless and a rapist. Enraged by her words, Raymond moves aggressively towards Elena, but his father intervenes, preventing any escalation. Taking Raymond to a separate room, his father acknowledges the gravity of the situation, explaining that the rumors of rape have spread like wildfire, staining Raymond's reputation. Despite the injustice, his father urges him to endure with patience, promising to find him a new apartment where he can live without judgment. Meanwhile, Antron begins working as a sweeper in a restaurant, where he encounters a female friend of his. She suggests going out for a drink and he decides to move along. Yusef visits an old barber shop for a haircut, where the barber attempts to lift his spirits, reminding him that he is now a free man and encouraging him to embrace life and leave the past behind. Despite the barber's efforts, Yusef's smile doesn't quite reach his eyes, indicating that his inner turmoil persists despite his newfound freedom. Raymond finally secures a job at a local shop, where he is visited by his old friends. One friend suggests that Raymond reach out to his ex-girlfriend Tanya, believing that reconnecting with her might help uplift his spirits and alleviate his depression. Initially hesitant, Raymond eventually agrees to contact her. The following night, Raymond goes to Tanya's home to apologize and explain the truth about his situation. Tanya expresses her disappointment, revealing that she wished he had written to her during his time in jail. Raymond admits his ignorance at the time and sincerely apologizes. Despite her initial reservations, Tanya forgives him, and their relationship rekindles. In another scene, Antron is walking with his female friend, who suggests they go on vacation and spend time together. However, Antron is resistant to the idea, grappling with mental trauma and a reluctance to socialize. She becomes frustrated and accuses him of being a rapist before storming off, leaving Antron feeling angry and powerless. Antron returns home and finds Bobby about to fall. He rushes to support him, lifting him up and gently placing him in bed. As he cares for his father, Antron recalls the cherished memories they shared together, and in a moment of forgiveness, he kisses Bobby on the forehead. Bobby, sensing Antron's forgiveness, feels a sense of relief wash over him. Meanwhile, Raymond has purchased a new apartment and is enjoying spending time with his girlfriend, embracing the fresh start in his life. The scene shifts to a meeting between the grown-up Kevin and Yusuf at a local mosque. Despite their desire to reintegrate into society, they face rejection from the community leader due to their criminal records. Kevin and Yusuf plead their innocence, but their pleas fall on deaf ears, and they are asked to leave, feeling disillusioned and rejected once again. The focus then turns to Corey's life, flashing back to the day of the court's decision. Corey is sentenced to 14 years in prison for rape and attempted murder, leaving his family devastated and helpless. In a moment of anger, Corey attempts to confront Elizabeth, but he is restrained by security and taken to jail. In the jail, his photograph is taken, and he is subjected to the unsettling gaze of a jail officer. This officer then makes a disturbing proposition, offering Corey to deliver drugs in exchange for protection from aggressive cellmates. Corey, maintaining his integrity, firmly rejects the offer and is escorted into his cell. Inside, Corey is confronted with the grim reality of prison life. The cell is in deplorable condition, with rats scurrying about and the stench of decay filling the air. Corey attempts to find solace in reading, but his efforts are interrupted as the lights suddenly go out. The following day, Corey cautiously makes his way to the jail mess hall for a meal, only to find chaos erupting as prisoners engage in violent confrontations. The turmoil fills him with fear, intensifying his desire to escape the confines of the jail. After managing to eat, Corey retreats to the lounge area to watch TV. However, his solitude is short-lived as the other inmates depart, leaving behind a group of bullies who subject Corey to physical and sexual harassment. In the aftermath of the assault, Corey is left battered and bleeding, prompting a visit to the doctor for medical treatment. Subsequently, the police officer approaches Corey once again, pressing him to procure drugs in exchange for protection from the bullies. Reluctantly, Corey agrees, recognizing it as a means of survival in the harsh environment of the jail. When Corey's mother visits him, he reassures her that he is managing despite the challenges he faces. The following day, Corey fulfills his agreement with the officer, delivering packages in exchange for protection from the bullies. For a brief period, this arrangement offers Corey a reprieve from the constant threat of violence. However, his respite is short-lived, as he is abruptly transferred to another prison, the Attica Correctional Facility, after 2 years in 1991. At Attica, Corey finds himself confronted by a new set of bullies who subject him to merciless beatings. Despite the brutality of his circumstances, Corey finds solace in the presence of Officer Robert, who proves to be kind and supportive. Corey is in a lot of pain and tries to look outside the window to see the outside world. He does not want to live in the cell anymore. He starts hallucinating about his brother, Mercy Wise, who later became transgender, and remembers all the sweet memories he had with his brother. But his hallucinations are interrupted by Robert, who comes to give him new clothes and tells him that he has to come to the office downstairs as he has an important call from his family. The officer then informs him of the dreadful news that his brother has been killed by a white man. Corey has a flashback of the time when his brother changed his gender. At that time, Corey's mother was really angry at Mercy and reprimanded him, telling him to get out of the house and never show his face again. Mercy gets emotional and prepares to leave the house. Corey also starts crying, and then Mercy hugs him and tells him to take care of himself and never lose hope. And then, Mercy leaves. This flashback makes Corey emotional, and he can't control himself and starts crying. But Robert solaces him by giving him a hug and requests him to remain patient. We see that Corey's mental health has been deeply affected. He is lying without clothes in his cell and doing strange things. Seeing this, Robert feels pity for him and brings him some magazines to pass the time. He also brings some card games and gives him instructions on how to play them. Corey becomes very thankful to him and says that once he leaves jail, he will do something good for him too. Robert says that it's his duty to protect the weak, and he knows that Corey is innocent and falsely put into prison. Robert presents him with an opportunity to work as a janitor, offering him a chance to earn money and regain a sense of purpose. Corey, grateful for the opportunity, expresses concern about potential harm from the bullies, but Robert reassures him of his protection. With newfound determination, Corey embraces the job, finding solace in the routine of cleaning while listening to music. However, a confrontation erupts one day when Corey's cellmate, Matias Reyes, interferes with the volume of the TV. Corey, frustrated by the intrusion, asserts himself by increasing the volume, sparking a heated altercation between the two. Robert and other officers swiftly intervene to quell the fight. Days pass and Corey is placed in front of the examining committee of the jail. They assess the mental status of the prisoners and decide whether to reduce or increase their punishment. Corey is then asked whether he accepts that he committed the crime or not. Corey replies, "I will never accept the crime, and I will never tell a lie again." The examining committee decides not to reduce the sentence and gives Corey another chance to appear next year. Corey's mother comes to see him again, but this time Corey becomes really emotional and grabs his mother's hand. They both start crying, but the police officers intervene and separate them. As they take Corey away, his mother shouts advice to him to stay patient and believes that God will help him. Corey's transfer to Wenda State Penitentiary in 1993 only brings more torment as he faces relentless bullying once again. Severely beaten, he nearly succumbs to his injuries, only to be revived by doctors. Given the choice between solitary confinement or remaining with other inmates, Corey opts for solitude. In solitary confinement, Corey finds solace in memories of his girlfriend, recalling moments shared before his wrongful incarceration. He reflects on the day of April 19, 1989, regretting his decision to join his friends in the park instead of spending time with her. In his hallucinations, he escapes to a fantasy world where he's enjoying a carefree day with his girlfriend at Disney World, but the harsh reality of his situation soon shatters the illusion. Despite facing the examining committee once more, Corey remains steadfast in his refusal to admit to a crime he didn't commit. He expresses a preference for death over perpetuating the lie forced upon him. Yet, the committee remains unmoved, refusing to reconsider his sentence. Alone and shackled, Corey seeks comfort in his imagination, embracing his mother's presence as a source of strength in his darkest moments. In 2001 in Auburn Correctional Facility, Corey finds the jail in better condition than the previous ones. On TV, news of the occurrence of 9/11 spreads, putting the whole country in a state of emergency. Corey here enjoys a slightly better lifestyle. He plays chess with his cellmates and has made friends. He regularly exercises in his cell and takes care of his health. One day he meets again with Matias Reyes, the same cellmate he had fought with once in prison. Matias asks him why he was imprisoned, to which Corey responds that he was illegally sentenced due to racism. The police couldn't find the real suspects, so they portrayed the black guys as the criminals for the rape case that occurred in Central Park on April 19, 1989. Matias is shocked to hear this and asks how many years Corey has spent in prison. Corey replies, 14 years. Matias is truly surprised and asks Corey how he managed to survive such a long punishment for a crime he didn't commit. Corey credits his survival to the help of God. This conversation has a profound effect on Matias. 1 year has passed, and it's now 2002. The police DEA agent Robert Morgan presents some files in front of Nancy and tells her that the real criminal who raped Tricia May Lee has now confessed his crime. And he is none other than Matias Reyes. Nancy is surprised to hear this news. Matias has been arrested for the murder of 3 other individuals, but the rape case of Tricia was not charged against him before. During the interview with Matias Reyes, Nancy asks if there was any pressure on him to confess to the crime or if anyone offered him a substantial amount of money to confess. Matias replies that there was no pressure, and he is confessing of his own free will. He then explains the whole incident. How Tricia was jogging and approached the dark end of Central Park, where he hit her head with a bat, causing her to bleed profusely. He then pushed her to a secluded area where he raped her and left her to die in the cold. Afterward, he put on Tricia's headset and walked away while listening to music. Nancy is still surprised and asks why he is admitting to his crime so openly now. Matias responds that he met an inmate who has suffered more than a decade-long prison sentence for crime he didn't commit, and it has opened his eyes. He doesn't want any other person to suffer because of his sins. After the DNA sample of Matias is taken and compared with the original DNA present at the crime site, it is proven to be a 100% match. It is now established that Matias is the real criminal and the 5 kids were innocent. Nancy then goes to meet Linda in a restaurant and presents her with the evidence, telling her that the kids she suspected to be criminals were actually innocent and that she should apologize to them. However, instead of apologizing and expressing regret for her mistakes, Linda stubbornly maintains her belief that the boys are the culprits and refuses to see them as innocent. Nancy then shows Linda the best-selling crime novels that she has written and points out that Linda has made enough money not from these books, but by selling the precious childhoods of the children. Linda, unmoved, ruthlessly leaves the restaurant and thanks Nancy for buying the books. The scene shifts to Corey, who is cleaning his room when an officer informs him that he has a phone call from home. Corey eagerly goes downstairs, picks up the call and hears his mother's voice delivering the incredible news that he is now free because the actual criminal has confessed to the crime. Corey's happiness knows no bounds. The same news reaches the rest of the boys: Antron, Kevin, Yusef, and Raymond. They all rejoice that the real culprit has been caught, and the unjust stigma of being rapists has been lifted from their shoulders. Now, all the boys gather and joyfully reunite with their families. Corey, now free, embraces his mother, and the overwhelming happiness cannot be put into words. All the boys congratulate each other and proudly raise the victory sign of their innocence. The entire city celebrates their newfound justice, and people become increasingly aware of the racial disparities present in the American legal system. The boys are hailed as heroes and are now known as the Exonerated Five, symbolizing their triumph over injustice and their resilience in the face of adversity. Now Corey and all the others feel free to roam the streets of New York as they are finally free and accepted by society. Corey then goes to the same shop where he once had a date with his girlfriend on April 19, 1989. The Exonerated Five then sue the city of New York for the racial discrimination and injustice that they faced. It is revealed that in 2014 a federal judge awarded the five men a settlement of $41 million, the largest in New York State history, for all the pain they had to endure. Later, in the post-credits scene, it is shown that all the Exonerated Five are living peacefully with their families in the present time, and their real-life faces are displayed alongside the fictional characters portrayed in the film. And that wraps up today's captivating true story. I hope you found it thought-provoking. What are your insights on the legal system in the United States? Feel free to share your views in the comments section. Until next time, stay well, see you in the next video.